and welcome to Marketing Media Money on CNBC Africa. My name is Kiamo Mosipile. On the show today, we explore breaking stereotypes in the advertising and media industry. A stereotype is generalized as a belief about a particular group of people, often oversimplified and not always accurate. We find out how the industry challenges these norms in their storytelling and approach to campaigns. From television commercials to billboards, digital campaigns, Africa's media and marketing landscape is evolving, but not without raising critical questions about who gets seen and how. As the continent's youth population grows and consumer bases diversify, brands are under increasing pressure to reflect the realities of the markets they serve. But has the industry done enough to challenge outdated narratives, racial tropes, gender stereotypes, and socio-economic exclusions? To help me explore this and more, I am joined by Kagiso Tshepe, Executive Creative Director at Grid Worldwide, and Ernest North, co-founder at Naked Insurance. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me here in studio. Just a brief overview in terms of representation and straying away from that gray area, which is stereotypes. Now, first and foremost, in the areas you work in, why would you say representation matters when getting into the hearts and minds of consumers? I'm going to start with you, Ernest.
I think you are asking a very important question, because one of the biggest sort of legacy issues in financial services and insurance specifically is thinking that it is something that only applies to a small percentage of people, and in particular, the people that sit in the corner and are very serious about their money. And so we set out to say, let's find a realistic way of engaging with the market as a whole, with the population as a whole, because ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody is thinking about their finances and they want to get it done the best possible way, even if they're not thinking about it actively.
Why is representation important?
I think it's good to be here. Thank you very much. I think it's very important to, if you think about this, essentially as brands and businesses, we're having conversations with consumers. Now, the problem is, if you are trying to have a conversation with someone whose language you don't speak, whose context you don't understand, that conversation is not going to go well. We won't understand each other. You'll be speaking at me and I will not be able to reply. It will not be a conversation. So it's important that in this conversation that you are having with people as a brand or as a business, you understand who they are, how they speak, what they're interested in, the things that they love, and why they would actually even choose you. Now, to do that, as an advertising agency or even as a marketing business, you have to have people that can have that conversation. If you have a room with just the same people, they will only speak to the same people in that particular language. They will not be able to speak to anyone else. So it's important then to have people in the room that can have conversations, that understand the context, that have lived experiences of the people that you are trying to talk to. Otherwise, it'll just be a one-way conversation.
But then how do you then put that into effect? Because in the boardrooms, we would assume that the decision makers are all from the same world. How are you then intentional about ensuring that there is diversity in the decisions that you then make, which will then translate to ads?
I think, it's been quite an age-old conversation around transformation, diversity, and that's how I guess we get to stereotyping people, because we are trying to speak to people and we only know one thing about them. And then we only saw that lady dancing once, and then now they'll always dance in our ads, So how we then, make a clear decision and a very informed one to go, let's get the people in. For a very long time, advertising looked a certain way in the boardrooms. And over the years, the industry has really, made some movements and decisions and actions that have brought different people, whether it's about their backgrounds, their languages, where they come from, and also the diversity of thinking in the room is important. So The moment you have a particular challenge, you need to look around the room and see if you have enough people with different understandings of the problem that you're trying to solve and the people you're trying to talk to.
And then when we then look at breaking out of some of those stereotypes, what are some of the concerted efforts that you have in place in a way to ensure that your storytelling reflects some of the cultural nuances when you're targeting certain audiences? Over to you, Ernest.
I think on the question of cultural nuances and storytelling, I think one of the biggest mistakes that brands often make is to assume that when you're speaking, that consumer is in the mindset of exclusively thinking about you and that they're giving you all their attention. The reality is that people's lives are busy and there's lots going on. And depending on what product you're advertising, their default level of interest is possibly quite low. I mean, if you think of insurance, it's very easy to make the mistake and thinking people are thinking about insurance actively. They're not. They're living busy lives out there. And so one of the most important things we recognized is saying we have to acknowledge that a wide range of people are busy with lots of different things in their lives and things that are taking up their attention. And so for us to spend enough time understanding and speaking to people, at number one, being represented internally in terms of old people and young people and all sorts of walks of life, so that we make sure we understand what people are busy with.
And I'd actually like to further explore your entrance into the market. Insurance is often seen as a very serious product, and I feel that Naked has been able to kind of break that stereotype of a very serious product, and it's accessible to many people and kind of made it less intimidating to access. Tell us a little bit more about that approach.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting challenge that we have, because on the one hand, insurance does need to be serious, because you need to be comfortable that if your 20 million rand house burns down or your 3 million rand car is in an accident, we have the money available and we're a serious business, we can pay or we can fix it. So on the one hand, it does need to be serious, but the product itself is just a promise that you're purchasing. And we can still meet that promise in a serious way, but the way in which we connect with you can be a real human way. And I think that's, if you look at the insurance advertising of old, that they went into that extreme in terms of being very serious without saying, but actually we're speaking to real humans, so we may as well have some fun with it. And we may as well say fun things like Ernie got naked on the golf course, because actually it doesn't take away from the seriousness of the product that you're buying, but we can still recognize that you're a real human and you're out there having fun, and we can have a connection in a fun way that gets you interested and shows some of our brand personality.
Sure. So I think the common thread between the both of you and the answers you've given me is definitely that human approach, and ensuring that the respective voices are in the room to then ensure that the right stories are being told about them. But we know while the needle of progress is going forward, there are still traps that organizations can fall into. So I then pose the question to you, Kagiso. Do you feel enough progress is being made to actively change the likelihood of perpetuating certain stereotypes?
I think there are quite a few things that the industry, particularly in Africa, that we've been able to do through the mentorship programs, free bursaries for people that come from not so great backgrounds where they could afford to go to an advertising school. So there are quite a few people that are actually actively, trying to, bring people in and making sure that you nurture those people that might have not necessarily come from, a background that, is the classic way that you think the person that works in advertising all come from, Rosebank, Sandton, wherever, that, getting people from everywhere and giving them an opportunity to actually, tell their stories. And so when we do that, then, we sort of open ourselves up to different types of thinking and people with different stories. So you cannot deny, someone, who has a lived experience of the thing that they're talking about, the story that they're telling. And so to have those kinds of people in the room really does, sort of break the sort of stereotypes space that we've been in for a long time. Progress has been made, but we can still do we can still do more. The moment we have our audience enjoying our work once again, then we will, you can almost tell that there's been progress behind the scenes. So getting enough people behind the scenes, getting enough young people, getting enough women in the room, getting enough black people in the room, as well as not just in the room, but in positions that matter, the positions that make the decisions. I think when we one day, and it's already starting to happen, like the new sort of, agencies coming along, the new people like myself who are being given the opportunity to actually, be part of the conversation and really steer the conversation. So the more of us that are getting into the space, the better, and that's when we'll start seeing even more bigger progress.
And Ernst, do you also agree with some of what Kagiso has said?
I think that's super important, and I think what resonates with me is the recognition of understanding where people are coming from before making decisions as to how you're going to speak with them. And I think what that probably also is important that we raise at this point, that is fairly obvious, is understandable that brands want to be careful and they want to be safe. I think good advertising, more often than not, does include an element of risk. And you have to recognize that sometimes if you are true in communicating the unique thing that you as a brand not only do, but that you believe as a brand, I think there will be an element of not resonating with everybody. As a marketer, saying you are never going to take risk is probably the wrong strategy, because you're not going to unlock significant upside.
So it's risk versus reward. The risk needs to be aligned with what potentially would result in impact to your target audience. What do you want to see happen in the future of advertising? Over to you, Kagiso.
What I'd like to see happen in the future of advertising is brands not just selling to people, but having a clear, good relationship with people. Let us do our work with purpose. Let us contribute to people's lives than just keep saying to them, we are selling. Let the relationship be clear and benefit both parties.
That's very nice. I'll finish off by saying the ideal for me is if we can continue telling stories that the rest of the world look at the ads being made in South Africa, and they're not just envious of the quality of our products, but they're envious of the people that sit behind those stories. And for us to tell stories that make people sit up and take notice of the quality of the stories, but also the quality of the people of the stories that come from South Africa.
Sure. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. And I think we could go on and on this particular conversation. But what an interesting time it has been with the both of you. What an insightful discussion we have had here about breaking stereotypes in the advertising and marketing industry. And that's how we wrap up this episode of Marketing Media Money. I'd like to thank my guests, Kagiso Tshepe, the Executive Creative Director at Grid Worldwide, and Ernest North, the co-founder at Naked Insurance. From me, Gyamo Mosipili, it's goodbye for now.